Welcome to the Nightbird Radio Podcast. I'm Timothy Saylor, and I'm going to be your host this evening as we sound out the subconscious, navigate the nocturnal, and explore the farthest reaches of our experience, coming at you from the back of an 86 Dodge Ram van on the rolling foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in the Great Forest, deep in the heart of the Kali Yuga. This is radio for the hauntological turn. This episode of the Nightbird Radio Podcast is brought to you by Anonymous, who comes in with a $25 donation and asks that I give the spirits an opportunity to speak through a little bibliomancy. The book was dealer's choice, and so I've chosen the Red Book, Liber Novus, by Carl Jung. Now let's see what the spirits have to say. The primordial force is the radiance of the sun, which the sons of the sun have carried in themselves for aeons and pass on to their children. And that was page 324 of the Reader's Edition for anyone who wants to follow up on that. Well, I'm recording this on a Sunday, so it only makes sense. If you'd like to support the show and hear your name or a cryptic message in lieu of your name read at the top of the next episode, head to nightbirdpodcast.com and navigate to the Support the Show page. Thank you so much for your generous support. It's what keeps the archons out of this show. And remember to subscribe to this show wherever you listen to your podcasts and give me a 5-star rating. That helps a lot. I'm also on Instagram at Nightbird Podcast, on YouTube at Nightbird Podcast, and on Telegram at t.me/NightbirdRadio. And welcome back, Nightbirds. It's great to have you back, and it's great to be back. This week I was joined by Tonja Vernazza. Tonja is a magical practitioner, a writer, a channel, an artisan, a reiki master, a diviner, and a seeker. She shared her story with me, and along the way we talked about all manner of topics, from space weirdness to ancient civilizations to the wild hunt, from Nephilim to navigating life's unexpected obstacles with the help of the spirits. She had some great stories for me, so I won't keep you too long here in the introduction. Let's get to the conversation. Tonja Vernazza, welcome to the Nightbird Radio Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I'm glad to hear it. I'm doing well too. Happy Lunar New Year.
Oh, yes. Happy Year of the Cat, I think.
I think it's
or
rabbit.
It depends.
Oh, is it depend?
Interesting. I think that the Vietnamese community calls it the Year of the Cat, and that everybody else thinks of it as the Year of the Rabbit.
Oh, cool. So does cat replace rabbit in their whole thing? Because I could see those kind of being similar, actually. Like
the tiny bit of Chinese astrology that I've looked at, beyond, the placemat at Mongolian barbecue,
right.
they'll put cat in parentheses. So
okay, cool. I'll have to look into it more. I'm glad we started out with something we don't know anything about.
Oh yeah. It's kind of funny. Like, I have a good friend. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's ethnic Chinese from Indonesia. And somehow we got really on this whole trip about Chinese astrology together. And so he basically just bought all these books and was kind of like, here, you read and you tell me.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
so yeah, I can't even remember her name. I still have the books, but it's been a while since I've picked them up. But
yeah, they'll call to you at some point, right?
Yeah,
usually
it's
how it goes.
I mean, there's a little bit of, it's kind of interesting because I'm a student of Western astrology. I'm a little bit better than beginner, but I'm certainly not prepared for, professional consultations. And I
Sure.
don't know much about electional yet or anything like that. So, um, looking at a Western style horoscope being this kind of snapshot at the minute and the second, if you can get it, of your birth and your location. Um, it seems like Chinese astrology is a lot more generational, because you
Okay.
can
That
get
makes
kind
sense.
of a little more granular, depending upon the day you were born and the hour you were born. But to me, it's kind of like there's some things that definitely that I can vibe with, but your quote unquote horoscope for the year is going to be the same as everybody else born in the year that you were born in, between February of that year and February of the following year.
Right, right.
And so in that way, it's a lot like outer planets, like Pluto or Neptune. It's like it's not really saying anything uh, specific about you. It's saying something specific about the whole group of people
Right, right, right.
that were all born in that time period.
And even sometimes people that were like, yeah, I won't even go into it more because I don't
I
even
mean,
know.
that's
But
my, I mean, that's just kind of like what I've observed from my little tiny bit of looking at it.
yeah,
But
I've only looked at it a very small bit too. And I really only like, I kind of just have an operating knowledge of Western astrology where like I know what I need to, it becomes more and more as I progress. But like, I know what I need to know to do the other things I do, like
mhm.
for timing and stuff like that. But I do enjoy it quite a bit. It was one of those things that like was one of the first bricks to fall off my wall of like this is bullshit, you know? Because
Oh, okay.
I was very much like just nothing. I was like I had had a pendulum swing at some point in my life where I went to the side of like none of this shit's real, right?
Okay.
And when I started looking at astrology, like, oh, I'll check it out. Maybe there's something to this. And was like, oh my God, like my chart is like exactly told my life story, like down to really minute details, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, this is unavoidably real. And then that was like the first, and then like the whole wall came down, right?
Right.
Then I'm like all in, like I'm doing crystals and shit. You know what I mean? Like,
The well, I had an aunt who was an astrologer, and um but she wasn't like a professional astrologer, but she was definitely more into um like numbers books and things like that. So, between like, she'd probably pick up like, Sydney Omar's like his yearbook or whatever. For She was a Capricorn, so um and then she'd also have um there's a lot of like, I haven't seen them in a really long time, and honestly I don't even know where she was picking them up. But at least back in like, they were a lot more popular decades ago, but they were just kind of like numerology books, and I'm not exactly even sure how they worked, but it was for gambling.
oh, cool.
So
Yeah,
and
that's what's up.
and so like, yeah, she was always betting on the ponies and all kinds of stuff. So
Did it
I mean,
work?
I guess it was, I'm not sure how it worked necessarily, and she jealously guarded them, but it was for, I guess it was to like how to pick, I don't know, it was everything from how to pick bingo cards to lottery numbers or whatever. And so
I like that really practical stuff. I think that's
yeah,
cool.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was fun.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun. Like Who doesn't want to win the lottery? Nightbirds, I hope you've been enjoying the conversation so far, and there's more to come. But first, I have to ask that you support the show. As I'm sure you've noticed, there are no commercials on this show. There are no paywalls. You get everything up front. For there to be free dialogue, I think it must remain uncaged by the interests of advertisers. But Nightbird Radio does cost time and money to make, and your support means I can spend less time delivering pizza and more time doing this. That's a win-win. So that's why Nightbird Radio is a value for value podcast. I hope you found value in this show, but I can't and won't dictate how much. Only you can decide that. But what I can do is invite you to take that value, turn it into a number, and head to nightbirdpodcast.com, navigate to the Support the Show page, and donate. We're also listed on podcastindex.org, which means you're able to send Bitcoin via the Lightning Network using your favorite Podcasting 2.0 apps, which can be found at newpodcastapps.com. I also accept services and dry goods in trade. There are many forms in which value is stored, after all. Email me at tim@nightbirdpodcast.com for more information. Sponsors will get a special mention at the top of the show. Thank you for your generous support. Want to hang out with other Nightbirds and Soapheads? For only $5 a month, you can gain access to the Polytechnic of the Numinauts, a private Discord server for artists, animists, and searchers that brings together the Nightbird Radio and Soapbox podcast communities. Just click the link I've provided in the show notes to get started. Now let's get back to the conversation. Okay, cool. So that brings me to a question that I want to ask, and that sort of leads into that, right? So, like, just if you want to give me a little bit of the backstory of, like, have you always had sort of a magical world? Have you always kind of lived in that world, or was there a moment or a progression? What was that like for you in your life?
Yeah, actually, I've kind of always lived here, and there's been a couple of times when I had some experiences, and usually it comes down to experiences with other people that made me kind of go, this ain't for me. And I tried to kind of escape it or run away from it. And that was a good experience on its own. But no, I mean, I think that I've always known magic is real, spirits are real. And so my family is very, I guess you could say that their philosophy is religion or spiritual experiences are a personal endeavor. And so I was never raised as anything. And it was always very, it was supportive, whatever you're into, that's fine. And so I explored a lot of things, and I had, I was blessed with diverse friends. And so I, would just as easily, go to synagogue with a Jewish friend as I would go to catechism with my friends down the street, or but my babysitter, nanny, whatever you want to call her, she was the daughter of one of two of my mother's best friends. And she was a feminist Wiccan. And so, and we would go and spend, days and weeks at a time staying with her, me and my little brother. And so we played a lot of games that were just imagination. You can do a lot of things with Greek mythology and a garden hose. We had fun. Somehow she got a hold of a U.S. game systems used to sell blank cards, in a box. Just looks exactly like what you would get if you bought a deck of tarot cards, but they were blank. And so they had the nice little plaid pattern on the back of the cards, kind of like my first Rider-Waite deck does. And so, yeah, we would, instead of coloring in coloring books, we would, hey, I'm going to draw my own death card.
Awesome. I love that.
And and so, yeah, I mean, like there were, books on the shelf that I didn't necessarily read at the time, but, she had a copy of the Golden Dawn, the big brick by Israel Regardie on the shelf. And she had some of Crowley's stuff on the shelf, and she had some of the Frost stuff on the shelf. And I think that the first book that I ever borrowed from her, I was probably around 11 years old. And the first book that I ever actually borrowed from her and read cover to cover was Z Budapest's The Women's Mysteries Volume 1. And then I sped through that and got Volume 2 from her. And then I think the third book was Starhawk's Spiral Dance. And that actually had more practical things in it. So, I just started kind of messing around with that stuff. And I don't even think I was in junior high yet.
Cool.
But
any early on experiences with that stuff that you'd want to share? Like when things that really worked, or even if they didn't go so well, that you can think of?
Well, yeah, when I was really, really little, it's kind of, I have different thoughts about it, and I have different, I've kind of tried, like, I don't know the answer, and I've never bothered to really ask. So I've tried out different stories to explain what initially happened. And so I'm not sure so my father, before he met my mom, was in the Air Force, and he spent a lot of time in North Africa. He also spent a lot of time in Europe and as far east as India, Nepal. And so somehow it's almost like somehow spirits from that part of the world, all these places that he lived in and had stayed in for periods of time, all kind of hitchhiked back to the US with him. And when I was born, they were kind of like, hey, she can see us and she can hear us. Let's use this one as our little speakerphone.
Oh, that's really cool.
And and it's kind of funny too. I had recently realized, or I had recently been told a story. I would say in the past year or two, my mother told me that when I was about a year old, um, I spiked a really bad fever, like 100 and something degrees, and like that's definitely bad for babies. You don't want to cook their little heads.
Yeah.
So they rushed me to the emergency room, and basically they were afraid that, I was gonna basically cook. So they stuck me in a vat of ice water. And so I kind of thought, like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, that's almost like, it sounds almost like a shamanic sickness. But I didn't really think much of it. But when I was probably about 3 or 4, I would like, and these are all stories that I've been told from various people who'd seen it in action. Like, I don't personally have any memory of it, but like we'd be having a barbecue or everybody be in the backyard or whatever. And all of the sudden, like, I would stop and like my eyes would roll into the back of my head. And like they said, it got really eerie because everything would get really quiet. The birds would stop chirping and the wind would come up. And then all of a sudden, this voice that didn't really sound like little 4-year-old me would come up and just be like, I am the goddess Isis. And I would prophecy all this weird stuff. And then, I'm back and, hey, I'm going to go get in the kiddie pool and what's up, everybody? I want a hot dog.
That's cool.
So, yeah, that kind of stuff happened all the time. And it was like I didn't have any control over it. And I really, as I got older and I could, remember that, like, I don't know, like, why do I have these blank spots? Because I would just kind of go to this black void, for want of a better word. And yeah, and it was kind of like, why is this happening? Like, I want to be back in my body, please. Like, what's happening? And so I didn't really have any control over it. So really, magic was a survival skill. It was like, I think I need to learn how to get my arms around this a little better so that I can have some control over it. But and then my family is just weird enough that they just took it in stride. They didn't care. They were like, okay.
That's
and
great.
They never treated it like it was weird or bad. They never tried to, I don't know. Everybody was very relaxed about it.
That's really cool to hear, because I hear a lot of, like, I've talked to people that have similar experiences, and at least not maybe to that extent of the channeling, but like in terms of voices, right? Or like they hear things, or they can sense things. And a lot of the time, and sadly, it seems like in our society that those things are so frowned upon that people like pretty much immediately go to like substances of some kind to like drown them out, or to control it. And which, mixed results on that. Like,
yeah.
To push something down is just, in my experience, doesn't ever like really turn out great for me.
Sure. And it's kind of, that makes me really sad that that people can have, these abilities and they're completely normal. And like, I couldn't tell you why Osset decided to land on me, and it's like, okay. But that's what happened. And I'm very grateful that I have a family that didn't make me feel weird about that or bad about it or anything like that. I think I had enough foresight to just know not to mention anything at school, or, that there
Right.
were certain people that, it was safe to talk about but those kinds of experiences or those kinds of things with. But, yeah, and I don't know how I knew that. It wasn't like anybody sat me down and explicitly said, like, we don't talk about your invisible friends.
Yeah, that sounds like
Why
some
am I
like the invisible friends also looking out for you, right? Like,
Well, and
like I
that's the
can't
other
say for
thing.
sure, but that's like also like let's not get Tanya black bagged. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, like, oh gosh, I don't even remember how old I was when I saw Firestarter, and I was like, oh,
Yes.
no,
Right.
I'm gonna, not tell people about this. Um, they and that was the thing too, is like until age 7, we lived on a small like homestead farm, and well, small, it was 11 acres. But we had cattle and goats and chickens and all that. Um, and like I didn't have just one invisible friend. I had an entourage.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing too about living in such a rural context, that like I had nobody my age. And I was born at a weird time too, because all of my cousins were probably around 8 to 12 years older than I was. And then everybody in the next generation hadn't been born yet. So I spent a lot of time alone. I spent a lot of time with animals. I mean, I had a horse, I had a pony, and dogs. And I probably took care of about 35 to 40 feral cats, because people used to, of course, dump their animals out in the country. Um, and so, yeah, I spent a lot of time hanging out in a favorite fig tree and talking with, 5 or 6 invisible friends I had. And thinking back on it, I'm not sure if they were land spirits or if they were fae or something else. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think we could, and that's something we could possibly get into is like where that intersection is, because there's a really cool kind of crossroads between all that stuff, right? Like
Oh yeah.
ancestors, angels, fae, land spirits. Like I love that space. Like there's a
Well, and
Venn diagram going on.
the thing is though, is that they're tricky. They got me in trouble a couple of times.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, one
Care to
time.
share? Yeah.
Oh sure. So when I was really little, I had just platinum blonde hair, and because nobody can see me right now, it's actually quite dark brown. Um, and so down to the probably down to my back. My mom used to spend a lot of time curling my hair, and I was very girly, but I also climbed trees and rode horses and did all this stuff. Um, and so there was a pair of scissors by the phone in the dining room. And so my mom had like kind of like this little thing set up. There was like the phone, and there was like notepads, and a stein. It was like an old beer stein that my dad had brought back from Germany. And it had pens and pencils and stuff like that. So there was this pair of very sharp scissors in there. And my mom had been absolutely adamant that, you do not touch these scissors. Okay, mom. So invisible friends convinced me that it's a good idea to let's cut my hair.
I knew
So
this was going.
I grabbed the scissors that I'm not supposed to touch, and I don't know where my mom was. She must have been out weeding or watering the garden, or I don't know what, but I was in the house by myself. And so I pull out my little stool so I can, see myself in the mirror. And they're just telling me what to do, and I'm here hacking off my beautiful long hair. And oh, my mom was furious when she came in and saw that. Oh my gosh, I was in so much trouble.
I bet.
I got a spanking, and I had to go I had to go to bed.
Right.
And I don't know, I heard this quiet, angry conversation on the phone. I'm guessing she was on the phone with my dad. And so I got the dreaded bowl cut to try and fix it. But yeah, they got me in big trouble
enough.
with that.
Yeah.
Well, the other time they convinced me to eat a whole so we had, like, my parents had like the big, I don't know if you've seen them, the big like tin Folgers coffee cans.
Yeah.
So we used to save them for all kinds of stuff. So
they're great for that.
Went in there, and then we had one that we used to go out when we used to go pick strawberries. We had a huge plot of just strawberries, and so my mom and I went out there one day to go pick strawberries. So we had, that can was probably almost full. And oh yeah, invisible friends talked me into eating almost all of those. And yeah, I got hives.
Oh wow.
From eating too many strawberries. But other than that, I never came to any real harm.
Yeah. That's interesting, Chris. For one thing, I feel like that. Okay, I don't know the answer to this, and this question it'll be fun. But do you think that that's happening like much more commonly, and that most people maybe just can't hear it or experience it, or don't experience it the same way? So like, I feel like those sound like common kid things. And I wonder how common it is for it to be spirits, but we just think of spirit. We just think, oh, I just had these ideas. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's more common to experience them as ideas, whereas you were able to kind of glimpse more into what was actually happening. What do you think about that?
I like it. I like the idea that, and I mean, I don't have children of my own, so I'm not 100% sure on that, but it does make me wonder if especially young children are doing something that's kind of like out of character and kind of naughty, and especially, sorry, that's my dog.
Well, you're good.
If they're doing something that's kind of out of character, like I kind of almost wonder, like, is there some spirit contact going on there that somebody who is just kind of tricksy, like, and it makes me also think about, I think Gordon White says something, I can't remember where I heard him say it, but he was talking about how excited like humans get when they can talk a spirit into doing something, whether that's, appear in smoke or, do something that, he says, like, spirits are just as excited to get humans to do stuff. And so I kind of wonder, it's like, are kids more open to that?
I definitely think so.
And so, it could be that, especially if a child does something that seems to be out of character, if they've got an invisible friend telling them to do something that's,
or like, here's a mild example, okay, but I think it's interesting. My nephew comes over all the time, and he's about like 2 in a couple months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this frog by the front door that's like kind of on this pedestal. It's just like a decorative frog, but he
Mhm.
loves this frog.
Mhm.
And he started laying like offerings of like rocks and, well, I call it offerings, but he starts laying rocks and like acorns and stuff at this frog's feet.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, that is, you know what I'm saying? Like there's something
Yeah.
more to that to me, because I can see it as the as a very symbolic act. And then, maybe I'm just reading offerings into it, and that's just the
Well,
place that he,
sure.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's what I would call kind of ritual behavior. I mean,
Yeah.
like even as a kid, like even long before I ever, heard, in like I don't know, in a magic book context, like building an altar, I
Yeah.
was building altar-like things at a very early age.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could be in it, of course it's going to look different for little kids. I mean, what are you going to put on, an altar, yeah, little flowers that you picked or rocks that you find, but,
I don't know. That's mostly
it's
what
your
I
Barbie
still put on the
doll.
altar. I was going to say my altar is a lot like that kid altar. Just like, here's a cool rock
Yeah.
I found.
Yeah. Or, here's this little weird tchotchke that, somebody gave me, or like, here's something that um, here's something I got from my dentist, my dentist's office. Like at the end of your, I don't know, at the end of your appointment, they had like a little treasure box and you could pick out
Yeah.
a little toy or something like that. So, maybe that little toy or tchotchke or whatever ends up on a shelf with, oh, here's a cool silver dollar I have, or, all
Because,
kinds of stuff.
and the reason I asked that question too is because I have a different experience than you. See, my experience is not knowing that I had an entourage, but then slowly coming to realize that I always have, and I just couldn't see it. And now I'm learning to communicate and see it. And, so it's like, I just wonder, I think that, um, I just think it's one of those things that we've obviously been conditioned to say, oh, that's just kid stuff, like, oh, that's just your
Yeah.
imaginary friend or whatever, but
Well, one thing I've come to learn is that it's constantly unfolding.
yeah,
There are experiences and relationships with spirit that I've had that, 10 years ago I thought, I had a pretty good idea what that was about. And then more stuff happens
yeah,
and somebody says something, or I read something, or I see a movie and just go, what? Like,
yeah,
maybe this has been going on a lot longer than I've been conscious of, or, there's some, um, layers of meaning and of agendas and who knows.
yeah,
But I've found that I'm not sure that I will ever have like all the answers. Um, that there's more and more, things that just unfold over time, especially as you keep going.
yeah. I
Uh,
found that too, even in my short, um, because I've only been really doing this for 4 years or so,
sure.
so it's like a whole new thing. But even in those 4 years, I can see what you're describing happening. I can only excited to see what comes next. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And same here. I'm just like, wow, really? This is kind of cool. So, um, like, Catholicism is something that I had always been, and and it's kind of funny because everybody I know who, well, not everybody, but most people I know who were raised Catholic, like really, they don't want much to do with it anymore. And, I mean, like, there's all these different things we could get into. There's the whole priest sex scandal with kids and which is horrifying. And, then there's all these different layers of, they were forced to go, by their mom, or whatever. And so they're just not that into it anymore. The only time you'll catch them in church is weddings and funerals. There's still some people who are still devoted, but I find that that's pretty rare. And because I wasn't raised in any particular faith, I mean, like, I'll just to give you like a really brief. So like my paternal grandparents were Masons. And my mom got into Scientology through my uncle, her brother. And so I have cousins that were, I think that still subscribe to the beliefs, but they are not a part of the church any longer. But they were hardcore. They were Sea Org.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. And then I spent, so my mom pulled me out of, after she and my dad divorced, she pulled me out of public school. And my little brother wasn't yet old enough for first grade or kindergarten. So he went to like daycare during the day when she returned to work. I was put into a Scientology school. So I spent the last half of second grade, third, fourth, and fifth grades in a Scientology school. And I was kind of the weird kid. And this is when invisible friends really helped. Because I didn't know what I thought about Scientology, but I never thought that it was for me.
Right.
So it was kind of strange being in school with other kids who, had been raised as Scientologists and who thoroughly subscribed to the ideas. And so where we lived, my best friends, in fact, I was perfectly in between them. They were their sisters 2 years apart, and I was like right in the middle. So like the eldest daughter was just 1 year older than me, and the youngest daughter was 1 year younger than me. And they did not go to Catholic school, so they went to catechism on Sundays. So if I spent the night on a Saturday night, I tagged along with them to go to church. And the first so when we go into catechism, the instructor, the lady who taught the classes, she had prayer cards as like a reward for answering questions correctly. So the first saint card I ever got was Saint Clare, who's the patron saint of psychics and remote viewers. And I happen to live in her county.
Oh, yeah. Cool. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so a relationship unfolded there, or probably has already been brewing, right?
That's one that's been coming, that's been years in the making. But it always felt like, I felt this pang of envy when, for instance, like they had their first communion, and they got the little white dresses and the veils. They look like little brides, and everybody threw them a party, and they got all these kind of cool trinkets, rosaries and small little Bibles and prayer cards and necklaces and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, how come I can't do this? How come I don't
Yeah.
get the party? So I had long felt that that Catholicism was kind of unfinished business for me. But I kind of shelved it. And then when I was in my 20s, I moved to San Francisco, and I met my first husband in art school. And he's a Filipino man, so he was born and raised Catholic, went through the whole traditional, baptized as an infant, and the whole 90 yards. And he and so, like, I was just curious, and so as our relationship had developed, I just was, as we got closer to, getting engaged and getting married, then it was like, oh, well, I want to convert. Because when I left my hometown, I was really disillusioned with what I will call paganism or neo-paganism. One of the best covens that I had ever belonged to, it was with my best friend and a couple other friends. And I was basically the token bi girl in a coven of gay men. And it was the most fun. It was amazing. And we were probably best described as Georgian Wiccans at the time. And at least that's the lineage of our high priest. And we had become so close, and so it was just the most smooth running. Every ritual, like, we barely even spoke because we could just, read each other's minds so well that, like, it was just this really well-oiled machine. And so when other people would come and visit and maybe do ritual with us, they jokingly called us the pearls and lace coven, because we usually met at our, well, we jokingly referred to him as our high priestess. But his home was beautiful. It was a fully refurbished, restored Victorian. And he had the front parlor arranged to be his ritual space, and sort of his equivalent of a spirit room, I guess. And it was gorgeous. It was, what was really interesting about this Victorian is that he had a little bit of Japanese like aesthetic to it. So that room had tatami mats lined in it. It was lined in tatami mats. And so, everything was just perfect and pretty and simple. And so everybody was just, kind of like, oh, I'm going to go to the pearls and lace coven for full moon ritual or whatever. Just because, I don't know, we seem to work together and run, much more smoothly than, I would say, 100% of the other groups that I've either been a part of or have observed, or been in community in some way with. And so after that fell apart, and I was leaving for San Francisco, I was pretty disillusioned with a lot of groups. A lot of things had gone down between myself and my babysitter. Like, we had been together for 2 decades, and there was just a lot of stuff that happened, and we completely fell apart. And at that point, I was just kind of like, this is not what I want for myself. The lifestyles that I was seeing, just even the happiness quotient, like, nobody seemed really happy. Nobody seemed really satisfied. And their lives were really messy in a lot of ways. And so when I went to San Francisco, I was definitely open to meeting other, I guess, Wiccans or pagans or whatever. And I just wasn't meeting anybody. It just seemed so dead. And so at that point, Catholicism seemed really, really just attractive and warm. It felt warm, like, wow, I am actually welcome here. And people are actually, happy to see me. And they seem to want nice things for me and good things for me. And so this is kind of neat. And so it was pretty easy to like fall back into, going to church every Sunday. So I signed up for what's called the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults. And it's about a year long. You go through the whole liturgical year with a small group of adults, and you basically learn the catechism. And at the end of it, on Easter Vigil, you receive all the sacraments. So you get baptized, confirmed, and you receive Holy Communion all at one shot. And that was a very, very powerful initiation. And it's wild. Like, I have photographs of me up at the communion rail where I'm receiving communion for the first time. And, it's all this typical stuff that you see in like New Age photographs. It's like the orbs, and you can see, like, it looks like I have a halo. I mean,
Awesome.
There's just like this beam of light on me, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, like confirmation is supposed to be when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. And so, like, you can kind of see that in photographic evidence.
I love it.
Oh, it was, and it's kind of funny because, and I think, like, talking to other people from other parts of the US even, or, I haven't even really spoken to many Catholics in other parts of the world. I mean, other than the Philippines. But every church kind of has its own flavor. I mean, obviously the pastor of the church is gonna change the personality of a church a lot. And, but, different ethnic groups are going to have their own traditions that they also bring into it. So the neat thing about the church I went to in San Francisco, it was St. Patrick's. And so obviously this is like an old Irish church, but really the Irish community really didn't live in San Francisco anymore. They all moved. Most of the Irish people, like, you might have a small Irish community out by Ocean Beach, but most of them moved further south down the peninsula. And so it was all Filipino priests and almost 100% Filipino congregation at St. Patrick's. And the Monsignor, who was the pastor there, every Sunday he did, the noon mass was sung Latin, and just gorgeous. The whole liturgy is sung, and it's all ecclesiastical Latin. So there was just this magnificent ritual, and he was still keeping the old language alive, and so I felt very at home there, and I felt very like I was I was kind of like, I'm where I need to be. And they don't necessarily call it magic. I mean, they'd probably call it miracles. But there was, like, one important thing to that community was that you choose a saint name for both your baptism and then for your confirmation as well. So you end up having like 2 saint names. So I thought long and hard about it, and I thought originally that I would be a Saint Bernadette, because I had a very strong just connection to Lourdes and the apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary there. And but it's kind of funny, like I even had like a lot of saint medals of Saint Bernadette, and I had holy water from Lourdes, and I really thought that she was going to be my patron saint, my baptismal name, because I had already known like way back that Saint Michael was going to be my confirmation saint, Saint Michael the Archangel. Because he was somebody I knew previously anyway, and it was like, oh yeah, Saint Michael. That's a that was just a given. But at the last minute, it turned out to be Saint Mary Magdalene.
Cool.
And my priest kind of made a funny face. When I was like, yeah, I'm Mary Magdalene Michael, and or Mary Michael, and it was kind of like, okay, and it's only like more recently, as I picked up a copy, for instance, of a more recent translation of the Nag Hammadi, and start reading like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and it's it was just, I'm sobbing in tears in front of her statue, and like, oh man, now I get it. And there was some other funny little sinks in there, but and it's also one of those things too where I wonder if I often wonder, there's a lot of Mary Magdalene is kind of a key player in a lot of Masonic stuff, and so sometimes I wonder if that was like an ancestral thing. Yeah. Because like my mom's family, especially, I mean, like more recently, they're Protestants. So all of my ancestors were just like, WTF? Like, what are you doing? So it took a while to kind of explain that one. And then, so I kind of wonder if it wasn't the connection with like my paternal grandparents, that kind of gave me Mary Magdalene as my patron saint. But that's the other funny thing, is that you go back far enough, and it's actually not that many generations, but both my mom's family and my dad's family ended up here because they were Quakers, and they were killing Quakers in England.
Yeah.
So, it's like I was able to, back in 2020, ancestry.com, everybody's like locked up in their house. And so, oh, well, we'll give you like worldwide access
I
to
did it too.
ancestry.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, for like something ridiculously cheap. It was like $60 or
Yeah.
$50 or something.
I've
I
never
was
gotten
like,
it since because it's so expensive compared to how it was then. Yeah.
well, not only that, I can't remember who bought them, but it's like
Yeah, it got
super
bought.
no bueno.
Yeah.
But I started just tracing it back and back and back and back, and I actually got all the way back to like just the UK. And my mom's side of the family had been sentenced to transportation. They were accused of stealing fabric. And this was in Scotland. And then I kind of wonder, like, well, this is the 1630s. They're executing Quakers and other, sort of what they were thinking as being heretical Protestants.
Yeah.
So, it's like part of me goes, well, were they really stealing, or were these trumped up charges just to get rid of Quakers, or, who knows?
Right.
Like my dad's side of the family, my first ancestor to land here, he seemed to be Navy. So he was just here on some expedition. But yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, just looking back at all that stuff, it's like, yeah, my family's been here for almost 400 years. And, and like, that was before a lot of things. But it seems like, and especially my mom's side of the family, but my dad's side of the family as well, like, they kind of show up and they start, they join the local meeting houses, but they kind of look around and see like Native Americans and go, we're going to be friends with those people. And so every, few years, as wherever they were living was getting more and more, there was more people coming in.
Yeah.
They would kind of, there's just all these funny reports of like, they and 20 of their, Indian friends, went off into Indiana territory and built a farmhouse. And so that's what they were kind of doing. It was kind of like, nah, peace out. It's too crowded.
Yeah.
I'm going to go hang out with our Native American friends, and
yeah, we're going to go with it where it's cool.
Farming.
Yeah. I like that.
But yeah, so I was, hardcore devout Catholic. I mean, I had gone to a Catholic university, and then and it was, my godfather was a deacon. So, we'd have just these, crazy dinner parties where he and I would start talking about, like, because I loved the movie The Last Temptation of Christ. And he thought it was terrible, so we used to debate about it all the time.
Yeah.
But after my godmother had passed away and my first husband and I got divorced, it felt really, the luster was gone. And I had spoken, I had changed churches at that point in time too. I started going to a different church that was closer to my apartment. And I had spoken to the priest about, here's what's happened. My husband has left me. And for a cool $500, and to say that I coerced him into marriage would get me a free pass, would get me an annulment, and then I could, once again marry in the Catholic Church if I had so chosen. But right before all of that, really hitting rock bottom with grief. Hecate shows up. And I had never really spoken to her before. And it was, it's hard to even, I have a hard time even recalling. I know that I was just in the depths of despair after, my first husband had left me and, we were done. And, it was just like, all I could do was just wail like a wounded animal. And I kept praying. I was praying rosaries like nonstop, and I was just begging, the Blessed Mother to like help me. And I got radio silence, and I didn't understand. It was just kind of like, what is happening? Like, why in my moment of my most need, like, why are you gone? And then who should appear but Hecate?
That's so interesting.
And she told me some things, and but mostly she was extremely sympathetic, extremely comforting, and she encouraged me to pull my things that had been stashed away in a wooden box in the top of a closet. So my old knife, my old tarot cards that I had owned for years. And she came to me in a series of visits, probably over like a week and a half. And it was kind of like, okay, I guess I'm back here again. And I didn't really know how to square that. Like, I really didn't know how to square, like, was being a Catholic just a blip on the radar? And like, what, now he's gone? Like, y'all don't want anything to do with me now? Well, fine. Which really wasn't the case, but
yeah, in the moment it can seem, I understand.
Yeah, in the moment it definitely seemed kind of like, wow, screw you guys.
When really, like, I think in my experience, it's like being passed off. Like, hey, you need to check this out for a little bit. But I'm sure you'll get to that anyway. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I mean, it was much later that, um, yeah, the BVM and I, made peace, and I kind of, and I'm sure that'll unfold over years to come as well. But eventually, excuse me, we made peace. But um, yeah, it was a very confusing time. That it was just kind of like, wait, I went all four paws in on this, and now you've abandoned me. Like, I don't understand. So screw you guys. I'm going home.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I started kind of slowly, and it wasn't, I was still kind of going to mass on Sundays. But then that even started dropping off, and I just kind of, and then at the same time, it wasn't like I was, building a giant altar and starting ritual, or, doing magic that much to begin with. I was just kind of, I was just trying to kind of navigate my life without this other person that I had really built my life, with and around. And I'm trying to figure out, what the next, because it really, like, I had no idea that it was that broken. And it was a total, like, just blindsided.
Yeah.
So, like, and I had never considered, what I would do without him. So just trying to, navigate life.
Yeah. It's that,
Do I want to
that
live? What do I want to do?
losing a world thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but I kind of, at least I dusted off the tools, and kind of slowly bought back some books that I had sold a long time before. And by then, like, the internet had really just started. Um, there were things like forums, which were great. All of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I can go check stuff out. And so um I started finding groups, and just talking to people online, and I had lost contact with my best friend, who I had been in a coven with back in my hometown. And we had lost contact, and we'd been out of contact for years and years. So I decided that, I was going to move, and I had met somebody else. And so there was just so much change going on. It was crazy. And I had a lot of false starts too. Like, I had, I had joined some online groups and things like that. And it was kind of like, this is kind of weird. I wasn't really sure how to do the whole online, like, ritual stuff. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me, because I had come from very old school. Like, I had lived with my teacher for years. And so, like, I kind of did an old-fashioned apprenticeship, if you will. So, that was like magic in real time. When you live with your teacher, a lot of the stuff, you don't get from books, you get from osmosis, really.
Yeah.
And we had done like that's a whole other thing too. We had done some, I mean, now in retrospect, I kind of go, that maybe that was a little bit risky, but we definitely did the FAFO on a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
I like
Um,
it.
yeah, I mean, it was great experience.
But yeah, risky
I
as you
would
said.
recommend it to anybody else though.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's it's everyone's own decision to make, right? If they're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
if they're gonna FAFO or not.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like have a cocktail party and somebody channels Asmodeus. Not, I mean, he's charming, by the way.
Sure, I'm great. I'm sure
Um,
he's a great cocktail guest. However,
oh, he's a wonderful cocktail guest. I mean, like, I remember the first time he showed up, it was like, um, I think he was just so happy that we didn't want anything from him. It
yeah,
was
I
just
think that's
like,
go ahead.
hi, welcome. What can I make you to drink, sir?
Yeah. Or like you weren't trying to bind him in a, like I'm assuming you weren't trying to like bind him in a triangle and compel
No,
him, right? Like
nothing like that.
I think that approach so much more often. Yeah, and we can go into that if you want, but
Sure.
that
No,
approach is I just feel like it yields much more. And, maybe it's just the type of person I am that's like, dude, I don't want to control you. I just want to talk.
yeah, no, seriously. And that's why there's a funny cartoon that I saw years ago. And it's just a little 4-panel comic strip. And it was like how you make friends in your 30s. And it's like it has this guy with chalk and he like draws a pentagram on the ground and then like summons a demon and then they're out playing basketball. Or there's another one that I love even more, which is it gosh, how did this comic go? So this guy's in his kitchen and he's making a sandwich and he's got the mustard and he like accidentally draws a sigil on the bread and summons a demon and he's kind of like, oh cool, you want a sandwich, do you want chips with that? So he hands this demon like a sandwich and chips and so like the last like pane of the comic or whatever is like, occasionally demons will show up and do stuff for him because they're like, hey, I can come over and get a sandwich with this guy.
But that to me is a really, and I haven't seen that, but I love that because to me, that's my whole theory of how I do this. Like, I just like maintain relationships.
Yeah.
And I feel like I end up getting what I need instead of having to uh, like wheedle it out of somebody what I think I want and then go on like a 6-month side quest only to realize like, oh, I didn't even want that.
Yeah. Well, there's that. And then like sometimes the things that you think that you want, aren't that good for you.
They're not for my highest good. Right. Like,
yeah. I mean, like, okay, here's an example. So I had a long-term relationship after my divorce. And he and I were together for probably, I don't know, 7, almost 8 years, something like that. So in the last couple of years, we were, it's kind of funny. He was a huge hockey fan. And he was talking about when his family had first immigrated to the US, they were kind of debating, do we move to Canada or do we move to the US? They ended up in the US, but some of his cousins were up in Canada. And he was a huge hockey fan. And so we used to go on vacation all the time to Vancouver in British Columbia. And so it seemed like every long weekend we would use that as an opportunity to go up there. And, to us, it was like we didn't have to sacrifice too many of our vacation days. We could just turn an extended, a long weekend into like a little bit of an extended trip, and we didn't, use up so much vacation. Sorry, the ills of living in the US with our paltry vacation time.
Right.
And I loved Vancouver. Vancouver was, I'm assuming it still is, amazing.
Vancouver's great.
Many years since I've been there, but I loved it. It was like somebody had flattened out San Francisco and scrubbed it down with hot water and bleach, and it was amazing. There was no litter anywhere.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful. I went for a little bit myself.
It's gorgeous, and people are super friendly. There was lots of fun things to do. I was in Stanley Park every chance I could get. There was a couple of times where, like the only time I've been in Seattle is running through SeaTac trying to catch a connecting flight because I had missed my original flight because I was having way too much fun on Granville Island. So we were, the politics of the time were bad. And so we were kind of like talking about, well, let's think about, immigrating to Canada together. So, long story short, we had done all the research, and we had been following the blogs of several expat Americans who had gone to Canada and seemed to be really loving life since they did it. And, those were really good resources because they really talked about all the logistics that you needed to have in place to be able to do that kind of a big move. And so we actually started the process. We had filled out the paperwork, and we were this close to like sending off our, passports and all this other stuff. But the one thing that they tell you is that right before you do that, you need to be ready to go, because you never know like what kind of window of time that they'll give you. Because like the minute you go and get you give them like your medical stuff and your passports and the forms, they can say you have to be up here in 3 months or 18 months or 2 years, like the window. There didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for like the window that they would give you. And so we were right there ready to go. But then we were also kind of going like, okay, so you need to have about 6 months. They have a matrix, a calculation or whatever. Depending upon how many people are in your family, you have to post a bond for X amount of dollars, which is supposed to be the equivalent of 6 months of living expenses. So that you're not like arriving and immediately going on like welfare or unemployment or whatever they've got. So we were saving money and we were getting ready to go. And then, it was like things started falling apart between us. And at the time, I really didn't understand it. And I remember I was talking to a girlfriend, and she was furious that I was leaving the country. And she's like, oh, I can't believe you're going to go up there. And even without thinking it, I told her, like, I don't even know like why it came out of my mouth. It was nothing I had consciously thought of. And I just said, I'm not moving to a foreign country with somebody I'm not married to. And I was like, what? Wait, where did that come from? So we were probably together for like another year and a half. And then the longer I thought about it, the more I kind of go, I don't want to be married to this person. Like, I hope he doesn't ask. And then that had fallen apart. And so we broke up and I never ended up in Canada. And then, all of this lovely stuff happened in 2020. And now I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah, no doubt.
Thank you, ancestors, for not letting me move to Canada.
Yeah. You got helped out there, I think. That's
what I mean. It's like like stuff. I mean, at the time I was really angry about that. Because I was just kind of like, why am I stuck here? And I want to, move forward and have an adventure and do something different. And I was pretty upset about it at the time, but then it ended up like way better than I did.
Yeah, so. I've had experiences like that as well. Where at the time I was like, this is a disaster and a massive failure, and I am ashamed. And then like I can look back like, oh wait, that's the best thing that happened.
Like, oh yeah, definitely.
It's just funny.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's also, I won't lie, there's been moments when, even like I've kind of looked around at like I have a dedicated room for ritual work, and I store all my stuff in there, all my my libraries in there, and my tools are in there. And there's been times where I'm getting ready to do some a campaign, or I'm getting ready to do like a big ritual, and I start looking at the prices of frankincense, or oh gosh, I've got to try and find whatever. And there's been times when I've kind of looked around and kind of went, what am I doing? Like, what is this? What am I doing? This is ridiculous. And then I just kind of go, I guess I've got a weird hobby.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, then there's also times when I think, and it's kind of similar to what you've been describing in a way, I think, where it's time to, I'm trying to phrase this right. And this is just my experience. So if it's not yours, that's, that's fine. Where it's time for me to learn acceptance for what's going to happen. And then there's times for me to like get in there and make shit happen. And I don't really know when those times are, besides just like following my intuition on it, right? So like sometimes I just don't even feel the power to get up and like do the thing that it takes. And I'm like, okay, it's not time for that, right? Like, let me like work on my inner stuff, right? And I wonder if that's maybe, and I was going to ask you this, and so if I'm being presumptuous, then I am, but do you think that's part of what like when you were talking about being sort of disenchanted with the paganism and the scene that you were in, like I sometimes wonder about being too much 100% of the time in that mode of like, we're going to make this happen. That kind of feels like it would be completely draining to me. Like I need that time of like, let me do something that's a little more like what for you it was Catholicism, right? I don't know. What are your thoughts there? That may be kind of a rambling question, but like I see, okay, I'm going to continue to elaborate. So often I see like people that are like, that are really compulsive about like making things happen. And I'm like, well, You don't look happy to me, and I don't want anything that you have.
Hmm. There's I don't know. I have a couple of thoughts about that. I mean, to me, it's like I want nothing to do with telling other people what to do.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, probably why I'm not in Davos right now. Um, but and I can never, I mean, that's the funny thing about, I don't think that anybody 100% knows themselves or their motivations or anything all at once. Like, okay, so like I've heard people talk, okay, say angels, for instance. Like I've heard people say, well, is an angel a class of spirits or is it an office?
Mm.
And I go, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Um, but at the same time, I mean, it's kind of like I kind of think about, do you is there a way to make that question, like, you know more, so like, I mean, like, I don't know, part of me thinks like it doesn't really matter that, and that even if you did ask a spirit about their nature, I'm not sure that they could answer any better than if you asked a human being, what is your nature?
That's really good. I like that a lot.
um and I mean, it's the same thing. Like um if you ask a person, like, is being a manager an office, or is that, like, a class of humans? Is that part of like who you are? And I'm not, I mean, like, there's some subtle differences there, but I'm not even sure that the person that you're asking that of could answer that question.
Yeah.
I mean, they could answer it, but I'm not sure that it would be um, comprehensive.
It's kind of like an uncertainty principle, right? Like, are you a particle or a wave? It's like, well,
Yes,
depends on
all of
when
the
you're asking
above.
it. Yeah, right.
I don't know, maybe. Um, and so, like, and I am definitely, like, I know that, um, I love divination. Divination's great, and I've got a lot of different tools in that particular toolbox. Um, but I think that there's also something to be said about not, and that's like, I love planning, and I love, you know, working in a direction that I think I want to go in. But a big part of me is also like, I need to be open to other stuff that might happen along the way that might either completely change the course of where I think I'm going or what I think I want. Um, I just, that's just me. I just like to be open to like some serendipity happening at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even though it happens on like really weird time, like schedules, I guess, I still feel kind of like the intuition, if it feels right, um, is like the time to do the thing.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, falling back on intuition, if you want to call it that, or, feelings or vibes or whatever. That's also a huge, huge, huge excuse to not do the thing, or, to be lazy and not be disciplined. And I think that there is definitely times for, making a commitment to doing a project that, spans multiple weeks, months, years sometimes. And I mean, you think about it, it's like, well, you go and get a college degree. You're making a commitment to do the thing in 4 years. And so you bring to bear, your tools and discipline and your commitment, and, you reach your goal at the end of 4 years. And so there's definitely a time and place for that in magic. And, and I think that that's where a lot of people get in trouble with spirits, is that, they don't think of introducing themselves or maintaining those relationships until they really need them. And, if you did that to a person, if you did that to a human person, they're not going to return your phone calls after a while.
Yeah.
They're going to realize, like, you are a self-centered user and I don't want anything to do with you. Now, granted, like, it's like, how do we meet human people? Well, sometimes you've got to hire a specialist. And so usually that means money. And you call and you make an appointment, and they, do the specialized thing for you, and you pay them the money, and you're done. Contract fulfilled. And then sometimes you make friends with that service provider, and sometimes, that'll develop into a friendship where you don't necessarily have to come with payment every single time. Sometimes they're your friend now, and they will do you a favor. But yeah, I mean, it's invite them to the cocktail party. Don't necessarily have them show up when you're on your way to the ER.
Right. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, keep the lines open. Keep the lines of communication open.
Oh, yeah.
It's good.
And that's, I mean, like, I even do that on my own. There's times when I kind of realize, like, oh, like, and the longer you go, the more relationships you make. It gets really hard to be able to do, like, I mean, if devotion's your jam, I'm okay with devotion. But, the more spirit friends you gain over the course of time, it's really hard to keep up on, more elaborate devotional practices for each and every one of them, and not neglect anybody.
It's a lot of bowls.
Yeah. So it's like, have a spirit cocktail party, invite everybody, dance and play music and drink, or, whatever your thing is. And that way you can kind of say hi to everybody.
I like that. I like that.
I mean, that's
a feast.
Yeah. And, and it's kind of funny because, like, really, it was Gordon White's Saint course. I had joined Rune Suit Premium membership right at the tail end of the grimoire course. And I think he posted something on Twitter about the Saint course starting soon. So I was like, do I care about saints? I don't know if I care about saints anymore. Like they kind of ignored me when I felt like I needed their support the most, and I felt kind of disrespected. So I don't know if I care about saints. And because by then I was, back hardcore. Like I was actually getting over Wicca. It had been something that, I was just most familiar with. And so I had actually joined a Gardnerian coven, and I had been initiated as a Gardnerian Wiccan and elevated to the 2nd degree. And at some point in time, I just kind of realized, like, this is just more of the same that I've been having my entire life. And I'm done. I'm just done. And I wasn't mad at anybody. I didn't dislike anybody. It was the wholesale thing. It was, this is beautiful, and I've gotten so much out of it, but it's not enough. And there's so much more. And I just felt like I was stuck in this cul-de-sac. And like nothing really made sense to me either, because I was like, there's a whole lot of assumptions as far as just kind of an underlying philosophy. I guess you'd call that cosmology, or even, I don't know. I just kind of went, this is kind of narrow, and it's not enough for me anymore. I need to find something else. So, through a variety of things, I had happened upon Gordon White stuff and kind of went, chaos magic, like, here's something that I was warned off of, or, kind of like, this is probably not for you, back in the late 80s. Because I was like, what's chaos magic? And everybody was like, oh no, that's not for you. No, ignore that. Okay. Because these were my friends, and these were people who, I thought had my best interests at heart, and who, knew me. So it was, really easy to, to take that advice and ignore it and just pretend it didn't exist. And so I never heard of it ever again. And so I was like pretty hardcore into like I had joined a couple of polytheist groups. And so I was very, very much in that kind of headspace. And I was on a private group, mostly Dionysians, and somebody had posted a blog post that Ivy Bromius had posted on her website, Circle Thrice. So I clicked through and read it and was just mind blown. I was like, project planning for magic? What an idea. So I think I spent like 3 or 4 days just binge reading so many sections of her blog. reading all about like what agile project planning was, and about bullet journals and about project planning. And so then that sent me down the rabbit hole of bullet journals, and I went and read a bunch of blog posts on his name's Ryder Carroll, I think. He's the inventor of the bullet journal, and so I started reading his stuff. And so I started following Ivy, I think, on Twitter. And through reading everything, she had mentioned, I'm a member of Rune Soup, and it's the best $10 a month I spend. Really? Rune Soup? What is this? Are these heathens? Like, I was like, huh, okay, cool. I'll go check it out. So here I go and check out Rune Soup, and I'm enchanted. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. He's like talking about conspiracy theory, and he's talking about like magic and just all this stuff. And it's like amazing. And, and then the amount of like history that he talks about, he's also talking about like a lot of ancient history and a lot of like quote unquote alternative history. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Like, where do I sign up? So I see like he's got an app, he must have posted something about how the Saints course is coming up. And I'm going, oh God, do I want to do this again? They wanted me to lie so I could just get married again in the church. And I don't know if I want to do that. And I was like, oh, what the hell? So I joined up with Rune Soup, and then I used that time when they were finishing up the Grimoire course live, that I just like binged his other couple. Because there was only, I think, the Sigils course and then the Journeying course that were out before that. So I was there when the Saints course happened live, and then I basically ordered all of his books. Well, I got Starships. Starships had been published, but I got that as a Kindle. But then I bought Pieces of Eight, and I bought Chaos Protocols also, and then just like binged read those as fast as I can. And so I started doing some of the stuff out of Chaos Protocols. Chaos
Protocols is so great.
Oh, it's fantastic. And so I was like, oh, cool. Like, I kind of like this Hermanubis guy. Let me go check him out, and let's check out this Headless Rite. And, I was like, let's do all the things. So we get into the Saints course. And so one of the first things in there was an introduction to Saint Cyprian. So I'm going like, why does that name sound so familiar? And so I'm going through the course, and I meet, Cyprian and in a journey. And so, and I mean, here's the thing about Saints too, is that, they've got an agenda. Their agenda is usually that they're Catholic. Their agenda is to get butts and pews. I mean, you'll find yourself, not always. Obviously you have free will and agency, and you can always say no, but Saints will always be trying to get you to square up and
Right.
figure out
It
your relationship with Christ.
it shouldn't
And
be a surprise to anyone that dealing with a saint is gonna like, yeah, because
no, they
yeah,
think that they're going to get something for nothing. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, saints are cool because most of them have been human at one point in time. So they're in this unique space where they understand what it's like to be a human person. But they just have extra superpowers um, and yeah, their agenda is definitely to make sure that you've got a good relationship with Christ. And whatever that might look like for you, and you might be surprised what that really looks like.
right, yeah, absolutely.
And so I remembered driving home one night. So I used to have a standing dinner date with my husband once a week. And that's a whole long, funny story. And I can tell that too if you want. But I did end up getting married a second time to somebody completely different. And so we used to have a standing dinner date at this little hole in the wall Indian restaurant about a mile and a half from where we lived. And so on my way home from the restaurant, so we used to meet there after work. And on my way home one night, I ended up having to take a detour. They were doing some road work on the normal route I took to get home. And so I ended up in this neighborhood that I had never been in before. And lo and behold, there was a St. Cyprian's church.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, that's right. That's where I've seen that before. So I go and chat up Cyprian a few more times, and he really wants me to go to Mass. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't want to go to Mass. I'm going to get struck by lightning, Cyprian. What are you talking about? um, so I show up there and I went online and looked at mass times, and so I decided, look, oh, okay, I'll go on a Saturday night. I'll go to the vigil mass, so that way I don't have to I'll sit in the back with the widows and the old people and just be kind of incognito. So yeah, that's how Cyprian got me back in church. And it was funny because I show up and then I realize it's really St. Cyprian of Carthage's church. So I'm sitting in the back of this church and Mass is happening. And so I kind of ask him, I'm like, Cyprian, like you're Cyprian of Antioch, and this church is actually for Cyprian of Carthage. Like, what do I make of this? And he's like, oh no, don't worry about it. He's like, I still pick up my mail there. Okay. Like, okay, that's cool. So yeah, I was going to Mass every Saturday night. And I mean, it was just wild because I had so many weird experiences. I remember sitting in the back of because I would always sit in the back pew. And I remember Mass is happening and I see, well, because there's a crucified Jesus always behind the altar, right? And I see his eyes blink and I'm like, what is happening? And I kind of see him there. I see Jesus there, and he kind of winks at me, and then then he's gone again. And I'm like,
well, that's awesome.
what? I don't know what to think. So yeah, it was kind of funny. Like I'm just kind of like going like, okay, so I am a magician who is secretly going to mass on Saturday nights. And
You almost think they'd have a sense of humor or something, right?
oh, completely. I mean, and then we go back to spirits having humans do weird things. So
Yes. I love it.
And so it was just, yeah, it was wild because then so I had been dogless for a couple of years at this point in time, probably like close to 3 years. And so I really wanted a dog again. And by this time we had moved to a bigger house. We'd actually moved to a real house, not we had first lived in a townhouse when we got married. And so now that we were living in a house with a backyard, I was like, I can have a dog again. And so we adopted a dog. And so, I mean, it's common enough that like I never ever wanted to be romantically involved with another magician. Never. I feel like I would just float away into the ether if I had another magician in the household. It's like, no, one magician per household. Thank you. And so I had to come through the family room to make it out to the backyard. And I was getting ready to do the headless rite. And we had adopted this dog, and we'd only had him for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. And he was fine. He'd fit right into the household and everything. And so, my husband sees me walking through, I've got this box of candles and rum, a bottle of rum and all this stuff. And I'm like, peace out. I'm going to be in the backyard. I'll see you later. So, I set up, I'm starting to set everything up, and I'm starting to just get ready to start the ritual. And I actually drew a circle for this one, I think. And the next thing I know, my dog is going absolutely apeshit, like just nuts. He is barking like crazy, and he is jumping up in the air, and he is just going bananas, like just crazy. So my husband just lets him out. And the next thing I know, he runs right past me and goes straight to this corner of the yard. And his hair is all standing up on end, and he's growling. And I realize, like, ew, it's an icky, creepy, little impy, icky spirit thing. I don't know what it is. So I threatened it with my ritual knife, and he was gone. And my dog was like, okay, cool. So he comes over, sits down in the middle of the circle, and just sits there and is like, okay, what's next? What are you doing? So he's kind of been my companion.
That's awesome. I love it.
And so yeah, after a couple of years of, and then, going through, sticking with Rune Soup, because I fell in love with it. The people there are amazing. Gordon's so smart, and he always makes me think about things in different ways. And it's just, Ivy was absolutely right. The best 10, now 12 or $15 I spend a month. And
Real quick,
yeah.
I need a bathroom break.
Okay.
And then when we get back, I want to talk about angels.
Okay.
Sweet. Yeah, so I don't know if that's a good segue or not, but we're just gonna do it.
Sure. Right on.
So, did you find that like when have angels been a constant for you, or have they kind of come and gone with your time in Christianity, or what's been your experience there? Because you said you had an early relationship with Saint Michael, right? Like you knew that was going to be
Yeah.
your confirmation, or whichever way it was, baptism or
Yeah.
confirmation. Um, so what's your like experience there, if you don't mind sharing that? Like, has that been a through line the whole time, or what?
I would say Saint Michael. Well, actually, the three archangels, Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael, have all been um, more or less present.
They just go with everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, and especially Michael. Like Michael's just always been around, I guess. I mean, sometimes he'll be more active in
Sure.
my life, I guess, than other times, but I've never felt like he was, far away, or, he wasn't taking my calls. Um, Other angels, though, that's been more recent, I
Yeah,
would say.
cool. That angel course on Rune Soup is like phenomenal, by the way.
It is. And I'm still actually working the Shem Farash.
Nice.
And that's been really eye-opening, really
Yeah.
interesting. I did I worked with another group. I think Gordon did a tea with them. It was just kind of they called themselves the Flappy Boys group or whatever. And
Yeah, the angel scryers.
yeah, and I had done one working with them, which was really potent and really interesting. And they were actually we were actually calling on Lucifer. And um and I think we were working the right out of, I can't remember which book it was. I mean, I know it was one of the Golden Horde books, but I can't remember which one it was. Um, but it was super. Just, I mean, it's a very long invocation, and things got really weird. Like during the invocation, it was one of those things where you just, even though I was like out in my backyard, which is pretty private and pretty quiet, as soon as we got really going, I could just really feel how everything had just changed. It was really, things got kind of eerie, I guess, is the best way to describe it. And then I went into Scry, and I don't know, it was just comical. It was like a scene out of like John Wick 3 or something. It was like a secretary or like an operator going like, "I'm sorry, all lines are busy at this time. Lucifer will visit you tonight in your dream, and you'll see him then." Okay. So, everybody kind of came back. We all gathered up again afterwards. And so, like, all these other people had like all these amazing messages and visions and, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I got told that, he'll see me in a few hours. So, but that night he showed up as promised in dream space and told me quite the story. His story had everything to do with the Watchers and or what the Watchers are described as in the Book of Enoch. And it was a really I don't know, it was a really interesting version of events. And I can say that I haven't talked to him again, and so I haven't really sensed that he's been around or anything. I think he said what he had to say, and I could probably dial him up again if I had questions. That being said, I'm really excited to hear that the Scarlet Imprint, Peter Gray is supposed to be publishing his praxis.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Can you share it all? Can you share any of that at all, or is that privileged information? If it is, I understand. I get it.
Well, what I can say is that he pointed to he pointed to that story and kind of gave a little bit more background as to, kind of like what was really going on. And it kind of speaks to, for, I don't know, for one of a better term to call it like the war of the sexes or the war between the sexes, or because my question had always been like, because I mean, like I grew up when I started, reading this stuff and getting into this stuff, it was all like feminist Wicca stuff. So, granted, they were going off this, this story that's not like real history of, an ancient, goddess-centered religion and all these kinds of things. And so I had gone around for a really long time, really, really believing that and kind of wondering like what went wrong. Like, how is it that women are, have fallen from that place of honor and equity? Why are they so abused now? I guess is the best way to put it. And so what I can say is that what he showed me kind of just added a little bit more to like why what was going on, not necessarily the why of it, but kind of like what was happening. And then like I think that when like human men realized that angels were treating human women a lot better, that they kind of threw a temper tantrum with swords, and there was a lot of blood.
Yeah.
And so, things have kind of sucked. But and I'm not sure like what his agenda is, and I'm not sure,
Sure.
if that story is it's a story, it's a different story.
Well, and
It definitely riffs off of what I read in the Book of Enoch, but
well, I think as a story too, like, well, that's the thing. Like, I don't think there is anything such thing as just a story. Like
sure.
this all are kind of parts. And right, like you said, like what's the agenda there? Like that's another thing I always have to look at. Like there's a lens that this stuff is being given through, and that spirit is often the lens, right? So I think that's
Mhm.
incredibly cool, interesting, and valuable. And I just love other perspectives. Like I tell me a story 10 different ways, and I'm closer to the truth if you just told me it one way.
Sure. And it's I don't know. I mean, there seems to be I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, one thing that, like, so I really got into watching the OA on Netflix as well. And I also watched Requiem, which is amazing. That's a really intense, really creepy show on Netflix about it's kind of related to John Dee and like the Enochian angels and
Oh,
stuff.
I need to check that out.
It's really good. I won't spoil it for you. Actually, it would be impossible to spoil it, I think. Um, but yeah, it's kind of interesting how angels are like super like kind of in the air recently.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've heard some different takes from people, especially on Enoch. And what's wild to me is that like Ethiopia is this like crazy place in Africa. It's like I think it's like the only country in Africa that was not colonized. Supposedly, the Ark of the Covenant lives there,
Right.
and that's where the books of Enoch were found. And and the and what's also weird to me, like one thing that I've been recently thinking with is that um like I love Ethiopian food, for instance. And I remember like this was God, decades ago that I remember sitting in an Ethiopian restaurant and they had like these paper placemats, and they had like the Ethiopian writing, and it was like a little alphabet, and they had like the English equivalents next to them, and I was like, wow, that's really wild. That looks so much like Armenian. And I have like a really close friend who's Armenian, and he was talking about how like the folklore or tradition or whatever says that Noah's Ark actually, when the floodwaters receded, the Ark is at Mount Ararat, which used to be Armenia. It's now in Turkey, but because there's a long-standing hostilities between Turkey and Armenia. But yeah, it's like Armenians had always talked, at least in their tradition, was that Noah's Ark had landed at Mount Ararat, and that supposedly it's still there. I don't know if that's true or not. But I always thought that was really interesting how like Enoch, I think, is Noah's great grandfather, and his books are found in Ethiopia back in the early 1800s, late 1700s. And actually, it's kind of interesting too. I just read this article in the most recent issue of the Smithsonian magazine, and they are interviewing a gentleman in there. He was working on this whole like Dead Sea Scrolls, Nag Hammadi translation project, and he's talking about, I guess, at some point in time, of some 150 years ago or whatever. Excuse me. They had found this steel and had washed up somewhere near, I don't know where it was. It was somewhere near the Arabian Sea, I think, or a river maybe. And the steel was supposedly carved by the Moabites, who were an enemy of the Israelites. And so they were talking about how this guy, they call him the polymath, that I guess he'd grown up in a very evangelical Christian home. And so he had a lot of questions about inconsistencies in the Bible and things like that. So eventually he ended up going to like theology school and all these other things. And so now he's like learning all these different ancient languages. So his part of the project, he was assigned to translate the books of Enoch. And so he had to go, and he was like one of two students who were learning Ge'ez, which is the ancient language. It's an Ethiopian language. And it's such an interesting, like, I mean, they're not that far apart, but they're also not that close. And there's so many other elements that come into this because, like, for instance, and I haven't read the book yet. I just got it not too long ago, but apparently Graham Hancock, before he wrote all of these books about, like underworld and supernatural and all these cool books, he used to be like a current events correspondent in Ethiopia. So the story, as he tells it, is that he was covering something and he was in Ethiopia and he ended up out like really close to the Eritrean border, I think. And he's at there's this building, it's like a chapel or a temple or whatever. And there's a priest out front, and like Graham Hancock describes him as having like these really gnarly cataracts. And he tells Graham Hancock that the Ark of the Covenant is in that building. And like, oh, can I see it? Nope, nobody can see it. Nobody can go in there. And so this mystery had, like, I don't know, sparked his interest. So now all of a sudden he ends up going on this completely different, career path and kind of leaving current events behind. And so he writes this book that I have yet to read. I'm fascinated about how supposedly what happened is that the Queen of Sheba had made a trip to go meet King Solomon. And apparently they had a romance going on. So Queen of Sheba comes back. Now, I've heard some people say Sheba is Ethiopia. I've heard other people say Sheba is actually Yemen. In any case, she has a son that is Solomon fathered. And apparently when this young man reaches some kind of adult age, he and a group of people go up into Jerusalem and steal the Ark of the Covenant and bring it back to Sheba. And so the Ethiopians maintain that what he stole is sitting in this temple in, I guess, northeastern Ethiopia. And so one thing that Graham Hancock was talking about is that it's really interesting how he's got like the Ethiopian church is like the only place that has they have a tradition of like venerating the Ark of the Covenant or the Ten Commandments in some way. That like, I guess every Ethiopian church has like either like a copy of like the Ten Commandments, like on tablets, or some kind of replica of the Ark, and that they regularly do processions with it. And so, there's that part of it. And then like what also kind of hooks in. And so like, I don't know, there's just so many different elements to it. And it's so wonderfully messy because like the tradition says that, Solomon built the temple by binding demons and having them do the work. And then, and then like when, one thing I did catch was like the three magi, when they come to visit the Christ child, or when he's an infant, that I'm not sure if it's Balthazar or one of them, but one of them is supposed to be from Sheba. And so it's like, whoa, this is all so messy.
Yeah, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, it was like I caught that somewhere, and it was like, they're from the east, but I mean, I guess that's east of Egypt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that's super interesting. And then you kind of go back and like angels being, older than the Israelites, either being part of Canaanite religion or Mesopotamian / Assyrian. I mean, they're all kind of cousins.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that it was, and for some reason, like, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know how they do it, but one thing I've found is that when spirits are trying to communicate something, I'm not sure if they can pluck it out of your own consciousness or how they exactly do it, but I have found that they will often use popular cultural references to try and explain something to you. They'll like show you, they'll play for you like a part of a song, or show you part of a movie. It kind of go like, it was kind of like this. So when Lucifer showed up in my dream, and I don't know if you've seen this movie or not. Have you seen the movie Hancock?
Yeah.
So near the end of the movie, when Will Smith, Hancock, is lying in the hospital bed, and Charlize Theron shows up, and she starts telling him their history and about, we were living together again, and they came for us with swords, and there was so much blood. Like Lucifer kind of went, yeah, when like things went down between men and the Watchers, it was like that. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer, dude.
Wow.
So how this all kind of connects to what I was thinking about with the OA, and I don't know if you've seen the OA at all.
I still haven't, but I get recommended it so often. I really need to watch it.
There's parts of it where it kind of goes like, why am I watching this, and then it picks up again, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. Two things about that is that well, I don't want to spoil it too. I don't want to spoil it for you. So I don't know how much I should say. There's a character in there who it has, the whole show has a lot to do with near-death experiences. And so one of the characters is studying near people who have experienced near-death experiences and trying to figure out how to sort of get the quote unquote superpowers that kind of come along with having a near-death experience. And like a lot of people have criticized like the angels of the Watchers as maybe they're not the good guys, because they have, if you look at all the technology that they were teaching women, metallurgy, meaning here's the technology to forge a sword or a spear or arrows, and astrology, and there's all these different kind of technologies that they were teaching, but they were teaching women. They were not teaching humankind. They were not teaching men. They were only teaching women. And what struck me about that story is that, similar to the OA, this person who's studying people with NDE experiences, he's looking for that technology and its ill-gotten gains, much like how men have taken the technology that angels taught to women, its ill-gotten gains. That the angels didn't mean for them to have that. They meant for women to have that. And it's kind of interesting too how even something like, I think out of all of it, it looks like cosmetics are the only thing we got to keep for ourselves.
Right. Yeah. No doubt.
Because like even in the ancient world, you don't really see women practicing astrology. I think there's one example I think Chris Brennan mentions in his book. She was a daughter of a well-known or famous astrologer, and that apparently she knew how to cast charts and had done some client work, but like she's rare. Most of the time, all the way from the ancient world all the way through the Renaissance and Middle Ages, it seems like astrology was something that was practiced only by men. So
there's a lot to unpack in that. Yeah. Because like part of me, it's the paranoid part of me is like, well, did they fucking know that was going to happen? like that seems like a pretty intense intervention, right?
Yeah.
On the Watcher's part. Like, whoops.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of there's also, like now that I'm thinking about it, also it occurs to me that I recently watched this documentary on this on this woman healer and shaman who lives in the Andes. And just even reading through, some of the background on that, and and even some of the stuff that Gordon White has been talking about, like on his podcast and stuff, about human beings are supposed to be, just all about, we're supposed to be making things prettier. We're supposed to be making things more beautiful. And it's like, if, well, this also kind of ties back into devotion. For a long time, I really struggled with how to be in a devotional relationship with a God when, what do you really have to offer them? If they're this very powerful being who has created things, like, what could I possibly offer to this spirit that would be of value? And so a lot of the recent things I've read and heard are that there isn't, anything that you could really offer other than arranging things in a beautiful way and making things more beautiful. And that's the offering, whether that means singing or dancing or making a bouquet of flowers or making an altar or, arranging things in such a way that, colors, painting, art, these things, make what you've been given and arrange it in such a way to make it more beautiful. And so you go back to the things that the Watchers gave women. It's almost like those gifts have been twisted and warped because metallurgy can just as easily make jewelry and bells and horns to make music with. And instead, they were made into weapons. And it's like, then you could even take it further and say, like, well, they also taught us astrology. So, hey, if they taught us about gemstones and metallurgy, maybe we should be making talismans.
Right. Yeah. Instead of missiles.
Instead of missiles and tanks and swords. Yeah. But it's almost,
And those things got taken and used to create empire, basically. So interesting, right?
But it doesn't seem to me like I've I don't know. I've read, the Book of Enoch. I've read the Book of Enoch out loud, outdoors. And those angels, those spirits, do not strike me as being the same spirits that Dr. D describes in Enochian magic. I have my doubts if those are the same people.
I do too. I don't really, I don't think so either.
I mean, even this physical description of them, like, I'm pretty sure those are not the same folks. But yeah, I don't know. Like, angels are kind of neat, but there's definitely I've noticed that like engaging with angels makes time weird.
Yeah.
That like I don't know, I'll find myself having to repeat myself because like people won't remember a conversation that we just had like 2 days ago, and it's like, really, like,
Interesting.
pretty sure I told you this whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they definitely make time a little bit weird, and um I don't know if I buy all the jealousy stuff too. Because I guess there's some folklore or whatever about, angels being jealous of people, that, why are we so favored by God? They're better. And I'm like, I don't really get that vibe from them, but
No.
also met every angel, so I don't know.
True. Yeah, yeah. I don't get that either. I get a almost a reverence, you
For
know?
people,
Yeah.
for humans.
Yeah, but maybe that's just the ones I have spoken to, you know?
Well, the Shemhamphorash, that's so far been a very interesting experience. Some of the ones that tie into like personal natal chart stuff are a lot more like tough love. I got screamed at pretty hard by
Oh yeah.
one of them. Um, but um, but the others are they have some pretty interesting perspectives and some pretty interesting advice. I mean, like, I can't say that it's any universal advice. I mean, it was definitely me specific.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a lot of it for me too.
yeah, I mean, I'm not out here like, hey, everybody, this is what an angel told me, so you all have to do this.
Yeah, that's why when I was
No.
gonna have, if there was any I was going to share, I made sure to ask the specific question of like, what do you have that I can share? Because the
Yeah,
rest of it was just like, this seems completely just me.
that's a good idea. I haven't asked that. I just kind of went with whatever you want to tell me. I'm
Yeah,
listening, and like a lot of it
and they
or
talk.
all of it didn't seem like it was applicable to anybody except for me.
Yeah, totally.
The I did get um I can't remember which decan of Aries the sun is exalted in. Um but they really wanted to talk to me about um nuclear weapons
Hmm.
and plans to try and blot out the sun.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's a concern of mine too, but I don't really know what to say about that.
Yeah, it can
I
get
mean, I
super
don't know.
heavy. It
Sometimes
can
they
get
come to you, and it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know who
yeah.
to. I don't know if I can do anything about that. Sorry.
It can be super heavy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like I share your concern, and now that you've told me about that, I'm kind of freaking out, but I don't know if there's anything I can do about it.
Hey, look, don't be afraid, but I got some shit to tell you about nukes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh man, come on.
Yeah.
It's like,
Um,
I saw the day after or whatever that was back
oh
when
yeah, that's a
I
horrifying.
I was little when I saw that
I
too, and I
think
was like,
that's some fear propaganda though. Like I actually don't think that's how it would be. I think like there's a big vein of that. Like honestly, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that kind of stuff. Even though
I don't
I
either. I mean,
loved
part
Mad
of me.
Max growing up, you know, like Mad Max
Oh
is like one of my
yeah.
favorite
Ooh.
movies. But like I don't think it's gonna happen like that.
Oh God, I hope not.
I think it's
Those
way
first two
weirder what
movies. I
happens.
mean, Thunderdome was way too campy to be taken seriously, but
Yeah.
the first two, oh
Yeah,
my God.
they're
I
fucking
was
brutal.
like, this is bad. I hope that
Yeah.
doesn't turn out like this. But I mean, when it comes to nukes, also, I mean, it's like we could always go in and talk to, the people who lived through it in Japan, but um, and I mean, I'll probably forever have that image of like, um, I don't know, there was, it's something you always shown like in high school history class or whatever, that outline of a human being as
Yeah.
before they got vaporized by, a nuke or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like,
They leave like a photo negative.
yeah, it's
Um
like a shadow or something, but out on the sidewalk or whatever.
yeah.
And so, I'll probably always remember that, but um
Well, the thing about nukes that are interesting to me, right, is that like there's actually scarier weapons to me. Like a firebombing to me would be like the most horrifying thing ever. Like the firebombing of Dresden. It's like
oh yeah.
in a lot of ways worse. However, it's I think like the nuke carries so much propaganda with it. It's like 9/10 of what it's for is just for that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like to the point where some people think that they're fake. I don't really think they're fake. I just think that like there's actually worse shit. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I've never heard anybody say they're fake.
I have.
That's a
Oh,
new
I
one for
have.
me.
Oh, uh,
Really?
okay. Look, there. That's one of the things that's happening right now, and like it's an interesting reaction to like the weirdness of reality that's occurring. And like, granted, there's a lot of propaganda flying around. There's a lot of cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance being imposed.
Yeah.
But yeah, you basically have like this kind of I see this current of like everything is a psyop, everything is fake. We
Right.
didn't do anything like, and like that's just as dangerous as falling into any of the psyops, right? Like
Sure.
I don't know. It's just an interesting effect of the times that we're in, I think.
Well, here's the other thing though that's kind of strange. Here's another book I just got in the mail. Like seriously, I think it showed up like 2 days ago. Um, I don't know if you saw the episode of like the 10 best conspiracy theory books that was
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
between Greg Carlwood and Gordon White. And so I think it was Gordon's book about like death on Mars. So I just got a copy of that. And right now I'm reading um, Richard Hoagland's Dark Mission. It's like a history of NASA.
Oh yeah.
And it is seriously blowing my mind.
There's
I
some
don't
sketchy
even,
shit.
and it's really weird too. I remember, oh my gosh, this was years ago. I want to say this was probably about, I don't know, 12 years ago or something. I was a member of my local um, chamber of commerce, and so the chamber of commerce had like little groups of people that would meet on a weekly basis to like share referrals and talk about business and how things were going and stuff like that. And so people had been basically being a group together, some people for like many years. And so these were all like friends. I mean, granted, they were professional friends, but, and
Yeah.
the thing that was nice was that like nobody could, nobody could be like the same business. Like you could only have one real estate agent, you could only have one insurance agent, you could only have one doctor, or whatever. So, and then each group, they had somebody from who was an actual Chamber of Commerce employee who was there to kind of like facilitate and make sure everybody was a member and whatever. And also to share news about the Chamber of Commerce and like events and promotional opportunities and things like that. So the guy from the Chamber of Commerce at our group, our local group, was this really cool guy. He was awesome. And so, one day he calls me up and he was like, he wanted to have lunch and talk. So I'm like, sure, no problem. So we meet for lunch and, we do some small talk and we talk about, business or whatever. And then he starts dropping this stuff on me and I have no idea what to do with it. He's talking to me about like gray aliens and like the moon and like just, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I don't know. It was really wild. And like what I couldn't understand was, so he starts telling me this whole thing about like different kinds of aliens, and some of them are friends, and then some of them are enemies. And then he starts telling me something about how the I don't know, like the aliens that are our enemies haven't invaded yet because I guess the secrecy is what protects us or something like that. Like the last thing that they want is for all the humans on Earth to be aware that they exist or something. And I'm like, this makes really no sense to me. I don't understand. But I don't know. I was sufficiently weirded out that I never like followed up. But that was really kind of,
I love it. To me, it sounds a lot like angels.
right? Yeah. I mean, I was just kind of like, what is
Like,
this?
there's some good ones, there's some bad ones,
And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And there seems to be so much overlap between angels, aliens, and the good neighbors that I'm not really sure who's who. And then that kind of goes back to my thinking.
Yeah, they're kind of all in the wild hunt.
Like, I don't even know if they'd know how to answer that question.
Yeah, they're all in the wild hunt too. Like, because they're all flying through the sky, like through the Milky Way. Like, it's kind of interesting. There's that connection.
Yeah. But I mean, the wild hunt is like a real thing, though. I mean, like I've got stories about that too, and they're not good stories.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of
they're the wild hunt came through my neighborhood one evening, and I was just like, everybody get inside and shut everything now. And when we woke up, well, in the middle of the night, I heard this loud wail, and I was just like, oh no, this is not good. And the next morning, we learned that a neighbor's 5-year-old son had been taken.
Damn.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess this poor little kid had the flu really bad, and was really congested. And he actually has a twin brother who lived, who's fine. But yeah,
that's like some textbook fairy stuff,
for
right?
real. Yeah, that was weird.
Wow.
Like and it was so loud, and I don't know if anybody else could hear it, but I was on the porch, and all of a sudden the wind just came up, so like it was just whipping. and like I could hear it. It sounded like hoofs, and it was so loud. And something, I don't know, if I heard it or something, but something told me the Morrigan is coming. And I'm like, oh shit. No, thank you. Nope. Close everything. Nobody's going outside until daylight. And yeah, and then what I realized that what I was hearing wailing was his mother when she realized that he had stopped breathing.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was just like, this is awful. Because yeah, like the next morning it was like, wait, why is the coroner's office here? What's happening? And yeah, it was awful, 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 awful. It's like, what do you even say to somebody?
Yeah.
I have no words. But yeah, so I'm very much like, if I hear anything that even a little hint of wild hunt,
Yeah.
we are inside. Close the doors.
That's definitely
and the windows.
not something to get caught up in. So have you I'm going to go back to the space stuff real quick. Have you ever read the accounts of the remote viewing of Mars from like they remote viewed Mars, like the point that they were remote viewing was like Mars millions of years ago. I'll send you a link.
Was this like when Ingo Swann was doing all the remote viewing?
I don't think it's an Ingo Swann one, but I do think it's like a CIA one. I have like a transcript of I have a blog with a transcript of it. I'll send to you because it's really interesting.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Because so I remember, let's see, it was probably about 2 years ago. I read one of Ingo Swann's books. And he didn't talk too much about his like remote viewing stuff. And I remember reading something from somebody else who was kind of like quoting Ingo Swann about, I guess they were supposed to be doing some remote viewing on the dark side of the moon or something.
Yeah,
and
that's interesting.
They got spotted, and like, I don't know, it was kind of unclear, like something basically came at them or swatted them away or did something.
Yeah, they were like he talks about it in Penetration. They were like, what he describes is like sounds like something doing rituals like on the dark side of the moon, and then like something huge comes and like, yeah, like get out. Yeah, they get seen. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what's kind of tripping me out. Like, so, like, I know absolutely zero about any of this stuff. Like, all I know is 2 weeks, between seeing the book recommendation thing and then hearing about, the Death on Mars book, where there's like, oh yeah, Mars straight up has like weapon signatures of like,
and that's what they saw when they remote viewed it, was like basically like these beings inside these pyramids that were hiding because their atmosphere had been destroyed by like some kind of weapons, and they were getting ready to like get the fuck out of there now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like one of those things where it's like, it's really compelling to me. Like,
well, and then the thing that I remember reading a book when I was in elementary school, I think it was called like Space Cat or something like that. And it was like this cat astronaut, and he was like flying around to all these planets. I mean, I don't know, it was like a children's book, but to like describe the planets to you.
Yeah.
And I remember being very compelled by some of the facts that they dropped on me about Venus. Also, like basically that Venus has like like an atmosphere that's like basically like 100% acid rain or something, and that it's very like hot, and I don't know, that was kind of weird too. And I'm like, wait, how, what
Yeah,
are you
the
talking
Venus has like a runaway greenhouse effect, or so they say, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
That could easily be like,
And then it kind of makes you wonder, like, is that BS or is that real or what's happening there? But yeah, I don't know. Like, reading this book by Hoagland is just like blowing my mind. But and I mean, going back to like, and I'm reminded of this guy telling me all this stuff, like, and I'm like, wait, the only thing that's protecting us from alien invasions is like that they're a secret. What, this sounds stupid. Like, what are you talking about? That still doesn't make any sense to me. But
yeah,
um but yeah, some of the things that Richard Hoagland's talking about in this book is just straight wild. He talked about the moon at first, and what did I listen to recently? I was listening to, maybe it was an Eon Byte episode where like, and it was the first I heard it, probably the first time, like maybe a year or two ago, where somebody was saying, like, somebody was telling me something about like the moon is really weird. Like, the moon has obviously been artificially placed there. And I'm like,
yeah. There's some really
never heard
interesting
that
stuff
before.
about that. Yeah,
And yeah,
when
and
the
so
lunar
like,
lander hit it, it rang like a bell.
that's what, yeah, I remember being told that too. And I was like, what? And so um then yeah, that, like, it sounds like it's like hollow and metallic. Um and then I was to tie this all, well, so like a couple of months ago, like my big trip was, like, it was kind of funny that it kind of led up to like Graham Hancock getting that mini series on Netflix. Because before that, I had basically just binge read a bunch of stuff that he had written. I read like Fingerprints of the Gods and Underworld. I threw Supernatural in there too. And then there was another book he wrote about kind of like the Masonic architecture of like Washington, D.C. But that one gets really, really involved because he's actually talking about the architecture of Paris and of London as well. Because like after the Great Fire in London, like they really redid this whole, they just basically started from, yeah. Sorry.
You're
um,
good.
um, they had to just basically like redesign the whole city because it had been just burnt to a crisp. And so that got me kind of like, then I started going down this other path, because a big part of that is that he's talking about like the Masons, and like related to like the Templars, and then he has like a whole couple of chapters devoted to basically, well, what's today southern France, where all these where the Cathars lived.
Yeah.
And then he talks about like the Albigensian Crusade. And so like there's one thing that I have a hard time kind of squaring, is that they call him Saint Dominic, but I think he's kind of not very saintly. And
Yeah.
and so here's Saint Dominic. He's basically promised all this stuff if he goes and I mean, obviously it's like free land and riches if you go and put down these, go slaughter these peaceful Gnostic people living in basically southern France. And I don't know why the Blessed Mother thinks that this is a person worthy of giving the rosary to, but that's where we get the rosary from, is from Saint Dominic.
Really?
Yeah. And
Hmm.
so, like, just the description of the Albigensian Crusade, I just go, oh, like,
Yeah,
this is horrible.
It's awful.
But like, and Graham's like kind of all over the place too. Like, he's written a book on Mars also, and I haven't read that. But yeah, the whole reading about the Albigensian Crusade then got me kind of like off on this more angels, more Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, all this kind of stuff. And then, yeah, in there, I'm hearing about, people mention, Inga Swan trying to remote view the moon and then getting kind of like knocked out of being able to see anything. And then I was talking to somebody else recently. Oh, I know what it was. So because of the whole Cathar country thing, that's when I started really getting into like Eon Bite podcast and started like learning more about Gnostics. And so then he recently had this woman astrologer on, and she was talking also about how the moon is fake and it was placed there. And she was talking about how I mean, it's an interesting theory. I haven't sat with it very long and I don't know what I really think about it, but she was talking about how like the moon being placed there has made changes on Earth, basically. So,
yeah, like it's
now
helped terraform the earth, possibly.
Possibly because, like, it obviously affects people and it affects water. It affects, the tides and things like that. And so she had a really interesting point. Or, thought, where she kind of was talking about how, like, every other animal on Earth, like, has like a heat or a rutting season, right? Like, animals are not 24/7 fertile. Like, they have like a mating season, right? And so she was saying that, like, humans are the only animal that are basically like fertile like 24/7. And she's saying, like, she was like, the fact that women can get, human women can get just pregnant over and over and over again at any time. She's like, oh, that kind of, I mean, apparently she's in on the Gnostic view, or one of the many, there seems to be many Gnostic viewpoints, but she was kind of saying that, like, that kind of makes sense if you look at the world as being this archonically controlled slave colony. That, like,
they need them. They need the souls.
Yeah, they want you to basically just keep breeding all the time, because that means, more and more slaves, I guess. So, and I didn't know really what to think about that. And I was like, what do you mean the moon was placed there? So I was talking with a group of friends recently, and then somebody else mentioned, I think it's Phobos is a moon. It's like a low orbit moon around Mars. And they said, yeah, there's something weird about that one too. That was probably put there. And I'm like, how come I've never heard about it? Stop. um, and then and then going back to Noah, that it was this totally mind-blowing thought that this friend of mine had said that in Genesis, I think, when they talk about how Noah, the ark comes to rest, and then there's a bow in the sky, that's supposed to be showing like God's promise that he'll never flood the earth again. And so this friend of mine was saying that, like, well, what if the bow was not, doesn't say a rainbow. It doesn't talk about the 7 colors or anything like that. It just says bow. What if that was like the first crescent of the moon? And that was like an ancient memory of like what happened when the moon was placed here.
Oh, interesting.
Like, so can you imagine that, like, the ark is really like a getaway spaceship from Mars, and we land, and then like we place the moon there, and really what that bow is like the first crescent.
That's wild. I like that. No, that's going to leave me with some things to think about. Hell yeah. This has been great.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that crazy? And
yeah,
so
this is good.
I just got into the chapter of Dark Mission, where he's talking about like the monuments on Mars, and like the face, and like some pyramids and some other stuff. And
there's definitely
that's
pyramids.
wild. And then something about crystal towers on the moon. I don't know. I'm just like,
Ingo Swann saw towers too. Some kind of like craters rimmed by these towers.
there's some pretty good pictures in this book that look like it looks like glass domes over craters, and they're really they don't, they're not like lopsided or anything like that, like you'd expect, like if it was like a meteor strike to make a crater. It's not like lopsided or weirdly shaped. They're like a perfect circle.
Yeah,
and
they're perfect.
See, like almost like a dome over them. So and then they were saying, then they had another picture where I guess there was like all these like kind of crystalline or glass like structures, like towers or something, but I'm not sure. And then there's some other business in there about, I guess, Buzz Aldrin was like a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason, and he was up there doing a ritual when they first landed on the moon. And
interesting.
I don't know. I guess Sirius was rising. And so they did a ritual before they actually stepped out of the capsule, I don't know, weird stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm gonna have to check out some of those books. I love that stuff. We're coming to the end, so real quick before we stop, do you want to tell people like where they can find you, your Etsy shop, anything like that?
Sure. My Etsy shop is called Lulu Bells. And I've got a few things in there, mostly some spiritual oils. I think I have a couple of candles, and I'm trying to remember what I've got in my inventory. I sold quite a bit over Christmas. And in fact, I'm going to do a big clearance sale in February.
Cool.
But, and I've got some like salves, like good for gardener salves, for cracked hands and cuticles and stuff. Let's see, find me. I have a blog. It's called inspiringliberation.com. And I'm trying to be better about writing there. It's just that everything's been happening so fast and furious that it's hard to keep up and keep writing.
Yeah, I get it.
And yeah, you can find me hanging around Rune Soup and a couple other of our favorite online guys like Secret Sun Institute. I'm there.
Cool.
I'm also a Patreon of Aeon Byte, and you'll find me on Ivy's Circle Thrice as well.
Very nice.
But I'm not on social media.
Yeah,
I
okay.
gave that up years ago.
That's good. I mean, yeah, there's no point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I value my sanity.
Yeah, I like the group thing is good for me. Like I like chats and stuff and forums and things like that. That's all the social I need, you know?
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. There's so much that we went to that like we could have unpacked like episodes and episodes on some of that. I love it. It's my favorite.
This is fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Sure.
And, hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Yeah, you too.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Do you experience weird shit? Do your parents not like to tell their friends about what you do in the woods? Do you make more friends in a graveyard than you do at a party populated by living humans? Do you have interactions with beings that are not strictly considered human? Do other people look at you like you're crazy when you mention talking to trees in casual conversation? If you fist pumped or even just answered yes to any of these questions, you may be a nightbird. So let's sing together. If you'd like to come on the show and flap your gums with me, share your stories, or just talk about the malleable nature of reality for a while, then send me an email at tim@nightbirdpodcast.com. That's tim@nightbirdpodcast.com. I'd love to have you on the show. But until then, I gotta fly. But before I go, let me say this. Remember, you are never alone. I believe you.